The definition of faith is to have complete confidence or trust in someone or something. Most have faith in religion, but faith can be outside of religion too. For example, I can have faith that my car will start in the morning and that the people I love and care about will be safe today. But what is faith? Why is it important? Why do people devote their lives to it? That is exactly what I want to uncover today. Across from me is Rabbi Joshua Herman from Hillel, Milwaukee. Thanks for joining us, and how are you today?
I'm doing well, Ethan. How are you doing?
Amazing. Let's get right into these topics.
That's good.
So, where did you find your where did your faith first come from?
For me, I think my faith came from where I assume it comes from a lot of people, which is just my upbringing. I wasn't raised in a particularly overly religious household, but sort of religion played a certain role in terms of our family's values and just kind of the way we operated. And so, sort of growing up, connected to the Jewish community, going to synagogue and having certain rituals at home. I sort of just approached big questions kind of through that. And as I got older and started to ask more, I'd start to read Jewish books and things like that, and my faith just kind of developed from there.
So, did your faith kind of start with your family, or did you find that on your own? How did you kind of get to connect with your faith best?
Sure. I think, my family's role in part was that we were always deeply connected to the Jewish community and to Judaism, and sort of within that religious context is where my faith developed. I'd say the sort of big moments for me were really kind of as I was entering adolescence and my family was going through some, challenging times with, some pretty major sickness in the family and the death of my grandfather. And, as a sort of kid kind of emerging into being a teenager and experiencing those things, they brought up really big questions of why is this happening? How do I understand it? And having the support of my family and also my community, my rabbi growing up kind of helped me address those questions in ways that allowed me to get through those really challenging moments as best as I could.
And so then, how does religion play a role in your own faith?
Yeah, I think for me, faith itself is kind of a very deeply personal and individual thing, but I've always found it most easy to express faith sort of through my religious tradition. I think on a certain level, faith is just a part of being a human being. You kind of have to have a certain level of faith because you can't understand or control everything in life, and so there's certain things where you say, well, I'm just going to have to, have faith that, if I go through this green light, the people are going to stop at that red light, because you can't really control it. But for me, sort of the religious community is what allowed me to kind of investigate these questions sort of through a textual tradition, through studying Jewish texts and sacred literature and so on and so forth, and also having a community to talk about these things with a sort of shared language and some shared values and shared history as well.
And then, so what does your faith kind of mean to you?
Yeah, I think my faith to me means that I can kind of get through life as best that I can, and that I can have ways to express the greatest joys and celebrate the really happy and exciting moments, the birth of a child or, a wedding or things like that. And also that it gives a way for me to get through the really difficult times, to kind of at least attempt to make some sort of sense over the suffering that I think we all experience in life, be it illness or the death of a loved one or, just the sort of challenges that we face as we go through the ups and downs of life.
And so there's those challenges, and you say that you bring up that you use your faith to kind of help you get through that. How do you kind of use that to get through those challenges as compared to some people where faith might be something where they blame faith because of that?
It's an interesting question, because I think for me, blaming faith is actually sort of part of the one of the possible answers, and something that I certainly did too. When I was going through some real challenges, as I mentioned, I remember one of the books that really made an impact to me is a book by Rabbi Harold Kushner called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And he actually himself wrote that when he was dealing with the death of his young child. And what it opened up to me was that I sort of thought that to live a life of faith meant that I had to assume that the suffering I was experiencing or that the people that I love were experiencing was part of some divine plan. But the book really is an investigation of the book of Job, and actually comes down sort of of where the book of Job does, which is to say we actually don't have access to those big questions, and that you don't have to have all of the answers and to know that, oh, everything happens for a reason, and I know what that reason is in order to get through those moments. That it's okay to have doubt. It's also, even for that matter, okay to be angry and upset, to realize that the things that you're experiencing that seem too much, they might actually be too much. It might be truly deeply unfair, and that doesn't mean that you're a bad person to think that things, or that you're should be cast out of your faith community or anything like that. That's what it is to be human, and so to have sort of doubt, to have faith without any doubt, to me is a little bit dangerous. It leads to a fundamentalism. That faith and doubt have to kind of go together in some way, and a certain amount of doubt is not only permissible, but is actually probably a healthy thing.
So then, why do you think faith is important in communities?
I think faith is important in communities because we can't have it all figured out. We can't have all the answers. I mean, it might seem like a less than an exciting example, but our economy runs on faith. The fact that if I give you $1, you think you understand what that little green piece, I guess we never give each other cash anymore. I probably Venmo you now, but you have faith, even more so, right? That the numbers on the screen actually mean something and that you'll be able to exchange it. And we know what happens to economies when that faith collapses, when they no longer think that the currency will be worth anything, and all of a sudden you have people loading up on gold because they have a belief that that will be a scarce resource and will retain value. So I literally don't think that human beings can exist in community without faith. And I think that being in communities allows us to have faith in each other, to notice that if we're in community with each other, that where I fall short, you might be able to pick up the slack and help me and support me, and hopefully vice versa as well. And we live in a community. That means that if I need help from that community because I'm sick and I can't work and I need someone to help take care of me, that I have faith that the community will be able to provide that for me.
And so there's kind of like there's the larger like global community and local community, but there's also the smaller church communities and stuff like that. But when it comes to those larger communities, there's so many different faiths. Like how do you find it easier to kind of or easy to work with someone of another faith to get through challenges and to get through those times and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think working with someone from another faith, to me, the joy of it is that I think that so much of what makes us human is what we have in common, and that to me, our sort of faith in terms of our religious identities are really about the language that we use to describe pretty universal truths. I might use particularly Jewish language because that's my faith tradition. Someone else might use language according to theirs. But what we're really trying to get to is similar things, right? We're trying to live a life of meaning. So many religions, hold many of the same values, right? Helping the poor, seeking justice, so on and so forth. And so we might use different language, but we're all sort of after the same thing. And so once we realize that sort of the part that I mentioned earlier, that faith is kind of part of just the human condition, we can work past some of the window dressings of the words we use and the garments that we wear and things like that to realize that we're all humans. We're all trying to live a life of meaning. We're all trying to get through those hard moments and celebrate those joyous moments and try to make this world a little bit of a better place than it is right now. And so it allows us to connect on that human level.
So kind of using values and like the common values of other faiths to help with creating that unity is how you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, definitely. And then realizing if we have those common values, then we can work together on doing these things. That suddenly, the synagogue down the street from the church, down the street from the mosque, they're all seeking the same things for this community, and those are in themselves, as you kind of mentioned, they're their own communities, and they're trying to work through all of this together, but how much more powerful than when we can all connect with each other. I don't think it's lost on a lot of people that, a lot of the partisanship and kind of, the ways that we struggle to talk to each other these days, back in the day in which we were forced to because we were, in the same places, talking about these big issues of faith, of God, of justice, of love, mercy, things like that. When we actually had those conversations, people were able to talk across difference a little bit better, something that we struggle to do a little bit more now. I think that that's less common.
Do you then, is there any struggles when it comes to like working with other faiths as compared to like, maybe not those values, but like the different beliefs that they may have, like as compared to like Christians who believe in Christ and stuff like that? Like, do you have any troubles there when trying to connect with another religion?
Troubles always emerge sometimes when you're trying to talk to other people. Even within the Jewish community, troubles emerge sometimes because, you know, they say two Jews, three opinions. There are all sorts of differences. So they certainly emerge. I think that they're pretty small challenges. I think that often you start to realize, like I said, you know, a Christian community might use, you know, different language to talk about, you know, certain things. But at the end of the day, you know, for the most part, the values are the same. And we might have a different way of describing those values. We might even have a different path to getting to the kind of world that we want. But for the most part, I think we all want the same thing. And when we can kind of focus on, you know, those underlying values as opposed to some of the window dressing, I think it really helps. And part of that is a form of faith in itself, right? Having faith that, you know, when you use different language than I do, when you kind of inhabit the world in a different way, that doesn't mean because you're a bad person and I'm a good person or vice versa, but rather we're all seeking the same things, and you might need something that I don't need, or you might choose to, you know, describe things or view things in a way that I don't, but at the end of the day, we really want the same things for ourselves and for those that we love.
So then is there like a, a particular moment or like pivotal moment in your life or a person that has caused you to look at your faith in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it really was that moment when I was, you know, it just so happened I was, you know, right around the age of turning 13, which in Jewish tradition means becoming, you know, bar mitzvah, becoming sort of an adult within the religious community, and having some of those struggles, you know, with my family. The story I often tell is that my mother was sick with cancer, you know, during my bar mitzvah. I still remember she was, you know, wearing a wig. She was getting treatment at the time, and the day of my bar mitzvah ceremony, actually my grandfather had the stroke, which ultimately killed him, and it was a really, really challenging moment, and that's when I was really getting into reading Jewish books, and I started reading the book that I mentioned earlier and other works, and realizing that there was something about this interaction between sort of text and the textual history and what I'm going through, that Jewish tradition became sort of something that I could kind of bounce ideas off of, that I could kind of use to seek out some kind of language to describe my troubles. And so, you know, the people in my life, my, you know, rabbi growing up, even my parents who kind of guided me towards those books and had those conversations, even really, really close friends of mine, one of whom ended up becoming a Presbyterian minister, were the people that I could talk to about those things and, you know, kind of bounce those ideas off of, and they allowed me to again, find some meaning in the world despite the like horrible stuff that I was experiencing as, you know, still a relatively young person.
All right. Well, it's been great talking with you, and I'm really looking forward to touching base with you even more. But first, let's see someone who had their faith strengthened by a stranger.
So I moved to Colorado for about 9 years, and I was young at the time, but I was still mad at my family for taking me away from my friends in elementary school and whatnot. But then we moved back to Wisconsin when I was 15, and it was right at the prime of freshman year. I was going into sophomore year. So they moved me back to a school of no friends, no nothing. And that was right after I had really gotten involved in my youth ministry in Colorado, where I was teaching younger kids and doing Sunday school classes and really having a solid group of friends with the same basis of faith as I did. So when we moved back, I was really mad at them, and I was really angry at God for why He would move me away from such good things. And I flew back for it was called Project Timothy. It was a youth missionary camp where we went around and did like outreaches to people. It was mostly homeless people. We'd bring food and stuff and talk about the word to them. At the end of the Project Timothy camp, this guy named Ethan came up to me. I had no idea who he was, ever. And he gave me a note that he said he had no idea who he wrote it for. He wrote it when we were all in prayer and worship, and he said he felt like it was for me, and it was this whole little note of how there were doors closing in my life and that I needed to trust in Him and just accept where my path went and everything. And it, made my jaw drop. I started sobbing and everything, and changed my life completely, because I hadn't told anybody I was angry at God for moving me back to Wisconsin, and he just gave me this note, and I was like, oh, okay. I guess I need to trust in him more and trust in his path. And I don't know, I think living in faith means that every day you always try to find the positive and something to be thankful for, even if it's as simple as looking out at a sunset and thanking God for the beauty of this world. It's the little things that can make your heart so full.
That story was really interesting. What about that story kind of plays into what we've already discussed?
I mean, I think, she discussed some of the trials and tribulations that she's faced, and how, her faith allowed her to still find meaning in the world. And I think the way she ended was really beautiful, that even if you've had difficult moments in your life, to still be in a position where you can appreciate a beautiful sunset is, that's what we're trying to get to, is to remember that, the sun will rise another day, the sun will set another day too, and you'll be able to experience and appreciate beauty even, after a moment of real challenge. I think that's the goal.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, just to kind of go back now, so within your community, how do you foster faith?
I think that my hope is to just really allow people to do a little bit of what I did, which is to sort of find an expression of faith through our tradition, is to teach text, to have prayer and all of that as well, and really community to help people sort of find a group of people or a setting in which they can express their fears, express their hopes, their doubts, and so on and so forth, in order to celebrate those great times and also get through those challenging times as well.
And so have you ever had like an experience of any sort of like kind of where you've kind of helped someone find faith at all?
I mean, I hope I've had some minor ones. Maybe it's more about finding comfort than faith even. I'm not really sure, but I was a congregational rabbi for a number of years and spent a lot of time with people with facing really serious illness. Oftentimes, people at the end of their lives, and oftentimes they'd ask me questions. What's going to happen to me when I die? And I would always say to them, like, what do you want to believe? That's a classic question of faith. None of us know what happens to us after we die. All you can do is have some sort of faith. And then, because I don't know the answer, whatever answer brings them comfort, that's the answer that I want to share with them in that moment. So that's a pretty sort of intense, powerful moment of it. But it's also sort of one of the beauties of the vocation I've chosen is to be able to share those really sacred moments in people's lives with them.
Absolutely. And about that vocation, so you're a rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you kind of what originally kind of drew you to becoming a rabbi?
A lot of what drew me to becoming a rabbi is exactly what I shared earlier in terms of my rabbi growing up's role in helping me through difficult times, and also just really a love of asking these really big questions, like the questions that you're asking me today, and trying to seek some kind of understanding or wisdom through Jewish tradition. And so I work now at Hillel Milwaukee, which serves Jewish college students, and these are students who are figuring out, what does it mean to me to be an adult? What does it mean to choose a career path, to find a partner in life? And these are big questions, and I get to help them use Jewish tradition to at least try to find some answers to those really big, powerful questions.
Absolutely. And so, working with college students, do you ever have anyone come in that isn't Jewish but just kind of needs a little bit more guidance on their own?
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting it, but actually we have a lot of students who come to our programs who aren't Jewish, sometimes because they're there with their Jewish friends and they find a really warm, welcoming community. More and more we have students who, for one reason or another, didn't feel sort of welcome or accepted in their faith community. It might have been because of their sexual identity or other things, and they come to Hillel and they find a really warm, loving community, and they say, wow, I want a place to ask these big questions too, and a place that will accept me for who I am, and they find it with us. And once in a great while they choose to convert to Judaism, which is really interesting. Often they don't, but they're part of our communities, and we celebrate holidays together and enjoy food and have a lot of fun, and it's really a great blessing to be a part of it.
And so has this been kind of you said you were a congregational rabbi before. Has this been a goal to kind of work with work with people as compared to being a congregational rabbi, or is it kind of the same kind of skill set?
Some of them are the same and some of them are different. It's funny because as a congregational rabbi, you do the whole, array of ages. So, I'm doing baby namings with babies that are, this big, and spending time with elderly people at the end of their lives as well. Now I have a little more focus on this one age of life, so it's different. But I think on a certain fundamental level, people are still asking a lot of the same questions, and so getting to actually apply some of what I've learned, watching people become parents, watching people deal with sickness and challenge at all different ages and all different sort of stages of life, has allowed me to hopefully offer a little bit of context for these college students that are, navigating this in their sort of late teens and early 20s.
Wow. So then what do you think faith means to people everywhere?
So I think different people might understand faith differently, but I think what it means to people everywhere is an attempt to find meaning in life. There's the old statement, there's no atheist in the foxhole, right? That when things are really troubling and you know that you're not in control and you're scared or worried, having something to hold on to, like you said in your intro earlier, right? It doesn't have to be faith in religion, right? It could be faith in your parents or in your friends, that the people that you love will support you and have your back. It can be just a certain sense of hope that things will work out, but I think that everyone, because we're not in control of everything, has to have faith. And so I think what it means to everyone, I at least I hope, is that we all just sort of share that as part of the human condition.
And so kind of just to go into your faith a little bit more, so I guess the process of being a rabbi, did you go through anything for years at a time, or what kind of was that process to get to where you are now?
So the training is, a lot of it's academic, right? Learning the text and things like that. But a lot of the really significant training comes from working with people. You don't just sort of become a rabbi like this. It's sort of a process you grow into, maybe a process you never stop growing into. I'm a parent, so I think becoming a parent is the same thing. I guess you do kind of become it in a moment, but you kind of grow into it. And so a lot of the really significant, learning came from being a student rabbi and just practicing with working with people. Like a powerful experience I had, for example, was we did a program called Clinical Pastoral Education, in which you go and you basically work as a chaplain in a hospital and try to provide some support for people. And, of course you walk in thinking, oh, I'm going to come in and provide some answers, and you don't. But really you learn a tremendous amount from these people who open up their lives and their hearts to you, and all of a sudden you learn from what they're going through, and you sort of grow and become a better listener and a more compassionate person through having those experiences.
And so you have you have children, you have a wife. Has that been as a rabbi? Has that been any having a family been any challenge to you as a rabbi, or has that just been an extra perk as well?
It's always a challenge when you're trying to do this rabbi thing and you didn't sleep because the baby was up all night. But on a deeper level, it's really just, I think, strengthened a lot of it. I was reading actually a friend who's a rabbi, his book when my daughter was born, and I remember him saying that the real ultimate moment of faith is when you see your child being born, because you realize that that's a whole world of experience that didn't exist and now exists. And so you have to have faith that there was something before me and there will be something after me. Seeing that in a child and seeing a child come into the world, which is just pure potential, right? They come out, they're kind of just screaming and crying and whatever, and suddenly they develop, interests and skills and things like that. It's such a powerful, beautiful thing. It beats the most beautiful sunset in terms of, what she mentioned earlier, and finding appreciation in the world.
Well, and so I guess so that there's been pivotal moments in your life of your faith and stuff like that. Has there been any pivotal moments as a rabbi or anything that you kind of any experiences you can quick share?
Yeah, there've been a lot. I mean, I'll say one that I'll never forget is I was working with someone in the hospital. Actually, I was a first-year rabbinical student, and they were really, really struggling, and they were very, very sick and dying, and had young children. And they asked me, well, hey, hotshot, you think you're going to be a rabbi? What would you say to someone like me? And I said, if I've learned anything, it's that I can't say anything to make this easier, but if I say the wrong thing, I can make it worse. That you have to let people sort of come up with these things on your own and just sort of love and support them the best that you can, and have a little humility that part of faith is knowing that you don't have all the answers.
All right, and well, that seems to be all the time that we have today, but thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for tuning into the show. I'm Ethan Ramsey, and this has been Exploring Faith.